What is the most disturbing fact about the universe? Story 1. Not necessarily disturbing, but eye-opening for me at least. You can fly through an asteroid field and never even notice. The density of the Kuiper belt is 8 times the mass of the moon distributed over 20,000 times the volume of the Earth. Space is really, really empty. Story 2. Based on current observations, the universe is moving apart at an accelerating rate such that eventually only 5% of the currently visible universe will ever be accessible to us. By the time we get to the other 95%, it will be moving away from us faster than we are capable of traveling to it, since it is regions of space and not three-dimensional objects that nuclear physics is concerned with. They can and will eventually move away from us faster than the speed of light. When that happens, trillion years give or take, space is really big. 5% of the visible universe is still like 23 million light years. The night sky will be solid black in all directions. Story 3. The universe is an ongoing explosion. That's where you live, in an explosion. Also, we don't know what living is. Sometimes atoms arranged in a certain way just get very haunted. That's us. When an explosion explodes hard enough, dust wakes up and thinks about itself, and then writes about it. Story 4. The size of the orbit between an electron and the nucleus of an atom, relatively speaking, is enormous. An atom is basically nothing in size to basically any living creature. The distance between atoms is similarly huge. The size of an orbit between planets and stars, solar systems, and galaxy centers, galaxies around whatever supermassive thing they orbit around, is also absolutely massive. Incomprehensibly so. Who's to say there isn't another step? If atoms are the building blocks of matter and compounds, and so on until galaxies are the building blocks of a universe, who's to say it stops there? All matter is basically empty space. You, me, the chair someone is sitting in, the phone they are holding. Just empty space with very little actual matter. Story 5. Now, I might be slightly off on these figures, but it's something that as a concept has stuck with me. If you start with a piece of A4 paper, let's call this measurement tool X, and you double it in size X2, and double it again in X3, and again at X4, and so on, you will reach the size of the entire observable universe by the time you get to X24 or something. But if you start with the same piece of A4 paper and work in the opposite direction, you will reach the size of the smallest things we know by the time you reach X45. We are almost twice as far away from the smallest things in the universe as we are from the entire universe itself, and we haven't even discovered the full extent of either scale yet. Story 6. Think of one of those tiny little sugar ants crawling around in your kitchen. To that ant, we created its entire world. We are so big and technologically advanced that they can barely perceive our size, much less our ability to harness and use electricity, computers, cell phones, and space travel. Given the size and age of the universe in all of its vast, unknowable complexity, there are likely beings out there that would see us in the same way we view that tiny ant. Story 7. I'd lean on quantum mechanics here and say the most disturbing thing is that perhaps there isn't one universe, and that time and space allow for an infinite amount of simulations in probability. So you can, in theory, change which timeline and universe you're in. Have you heard of the idea of quantum immortality? It's basically a quirk of the many worlds hypothesis, which can be interpreted as there is one universe in which every single quantum process turns out in your favor, and in that universe, you never die. This will be true for everyone, but because the odds are so unfathomably low, we don't see it happening. Story 8. Then there's another extension of it that gets much more wooey, in which the claim is made that this timeline is the one your consciousness resides in, meaning that every single one of us is immortal in the timeline we're experiencing, but since nobody else is, we can only be sure it's happening when we get to our own 200 or so birthday without issue. It's a thought experiment and not taken seriously by anyone. Serious but it's definitely interesting to think about. Story 9. Without the vacuum of space, the sun's radiation would make it sound like jackhammers were around us 24/7. Now, most people know that light travels from the sun to us in 8 minutes. Sound is 13 years old. So in this situation without the vacuum, if the sun went out, we would have no light after 8 minutes, but would still hear that sound for the next 13 years if we lived that long. Not really disturbing, but cool, I guess. Story 10, how insanely vast it is, and that it is expanding even further at an accelerating rate. So many things exist out there that will forever be out of our reach. There may be life we will never encounter. There may be wonders we will never observe unless we create them ourselves. A human life, with all its experiences, feelings, and knowledge, fades into nothing before we even begin to approach the true scale of the universe, although hopefully humanity's entire history will be noticeable. Story 11. While we usually think of the speed of light as being impossibly fast, the reality is that on a universal scale, it's ridiculously slow. C is the maximum speed information can move through the universe, and it's just too darn slow for us to have any realistic chance of exploring anything except perhaps the nearest stars. All the sci-fi dreams of visiting another galaxy. The closest galaxy takes light 25,000 years to reach. These speeds aren't at all realistic for us to achieve either. The relatively slow speed of information, the same speed that light travels, means life on Earth is effectively trapped in our little neighborhood forever. Story 12. There was a time after the Big Bang when most water in the universe was liquid, because the ambient temperature of space would have been comfortable from our perspective. It's incredibly likely that life evolved in weird diffuse water pockets throughout the universe. The temperature continued dropping, and the only life that survived was that which could go dormant. The current theory is that dormant life is what seeded Earth. Story 13. 68% of stuff in the observable universe is imperceptible. We simply cannot observe it in any way whatsoever. We label it dark energy to keep ourselves sane. 27% of stuff is imperceptible in all ways except for its gravitational footprint. We can't see it at all, but we know it's there because of gravitational lensing. It bends light around it. It has mass, and that's all we know. It's dark, and we think it's matter. Less than 5% of the entire observable universe is normal matter. Think about that. We can only observe less than a 20th of our universe. The rest is dark, and as of right now, unknowable. We are special. Story 14. Can't call it a fact, but this is a belief and a theory I have zero way of ever testing. It is my belief that the age of the universe and the Big Bang are just man's need for an answer, and that our brains are way too primitive to accept the fact that the universe has always been here, will always be here, and that this is just our time of cognizant awareness of it. The Big Bang is much like religion, a false method of explaining what we cannot comprehend. Again, this is just my belief. The other thing I believe is that the coincidence that proteins and carbon mixed with liquid on this rock and life formed and evolved did indeed happen, and in a universe that is infinite, that means the probability that this same event has happened likely an infinite number of times, across an infinite number of worlds, with stars, etc. I feel we need to give a finite beginning and age of the universe and its contents in order to give us a level of importance to our tiny little existence on this nondescript rock in a rather normal solar system. In short, the Big Bang, like religion, exists to try and make us feel as if we are unique and we are special. We are neither. The universe doesn't even know we're here, nor does it care, and it can and will wipe us out without ever knowing we were here. So live your life to the fullest. Enjoy the infinitesimally small amount of time your atoms have organized, and be sentient until they decay and reorganize into another sentient creature at some other moment in an infinitely old universe. Again, just a theory/belief that's been rolling around my head that means we don't matter, not one bit in the grand scheme of the universe. Story 15. Even a trip to Mars is way more problematic than many people assume. The length of the journey will leave astronauts unable to move in even half Earth's gravity when they arrive due to atrophy. Then we have the problem of space radiation. A human can take only so much of it, and there is no escape from it in space. 2. The length of the journey will leave astronauts unable to move in even half Earth's gravity when they arrive due to atrophy. As you said, it can sometimes be a couple of days, but for most, they report a couple of weeks before they are fully mobile and no longer getting the spins. But the point is that an entire first crew of people would be completely useless for however long it takes to recover. If you watch some recovery videos, astronauts are carried out of the vehicle. It isn't just a procedure, they are too weak to walk. A 3A human can take only so much of it, radiation. I think science would agree. Astronauts are exposed to ionizing radiation with effective doses in the range from 50 to 2000 MSV. 1 MSV of ionizing radiation is equivalent to about 3 chest X-rays. So that's like if you were to have 150 to 6,000 chest X-rays. And those numbers are from relatively short trips. Mars, at its closest approach, is about 7 months, but 9 to 14 months in space could be possible depending on what propulsion they choose. Also, the simulated gravity is definitely a thing, but science seems to move away from the centrifuge idea and more toward using the g-force from acceleration and deceleration to achieve it. Story 16. Alien life is all around us, just watching us, and we're oblivious. Cue the dark forest. Hypothesis. The dark forest hypothesis is the conjecture that many alien civilizations exist throughout the universe, but they are both silent and hostile, maintaining their undetectability by humanity for fear of being destroyed by another hostile and undetected civilization. It is presumed that any spacefaring civilization would view any other intelligent life as an inevitable threat, and thus destroy any nascent life that makes itself known. As a result, the electromagnetic spectrum would be relatively quiet, without evidence of any intelligent alien life, as in a dark forest filled with armed hunters stalking through the trees like ghosts. Story 17. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. Carl Sagan, Story 18. What is beyond the observable universe is likely just more universe. Astronomers and physicists know that light travels at a finite speed, and the universe has existed for a finite amount of time. Therefore, the light from beyond certain regions of space-time has not had long enough time to reach the vantage point of Earth's current location. We have only mapped and understood such a small amount of the universe. It's actually much, much, much larger. We'll never be able to successfully map it. Story 19. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Life first appeared 3.7 billion years ago, and for 3.1 billion years, life on Earth stayed virtually the same. Single-cell organisms until 600 million years ago, and then boom, a cornucopia of complex multicellular life, and we have no idea why it took so long. One theory is that Seg-A, the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, was last active before the Cambrian explosion and regularly sterilized the galaxy with radiation. Story 20. It is manifestly indifferent to our existence. Life, our lives, our entire history and death are all meaningless as far as the great cosmos is concerned. I am an atheist, an IMHO. This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks to accepting existence without supernatural beliefs. Being the work of some creator is comforting. It reassures us that there is some purpose to our lives. The most fundamental, most human question of all is, why are we here? Quite often, it provides the comfort that bad people will get punished, even when we see them apparently face no consequences. Karma, the threat of judgment and eternal damnation, and reincarnation myths are all just ways of trying to convince people to be good people and reassure the victims that the evildoers will face some kind of divine comeuppance. It tells us that we do not need to fear death, rather, that death is merely the doorway to whatever comes next. Sometimes it gives our mutant monkey tribalism instincts a reason to coexist with people who look and sound different to us. That cooperation helped drive the evolution of civilization as we know it. Sometimes it provides a boogeyman scapegoat to blame for the vagaries of life, someone we can blame for the existence of evil. The most terrible truth of the universe is that we are solely responsible for creating meaning in our lives. We are totally responsible for our actions and our omissions of action. Story 21. In quantum field theory, a false vacuum is a hypothetical vacuum that is relatively stable, but not in the most stable state possible. In this condition, it is called metastable. It may last for a very long time in this state, but could eventually decay to the more stable one, an event known as false vacuum decay. The most common suggestion of how such a decay might happen in our universe is called bubble nucleation. If a small region of the universe by chance reached a more stable vacuum, this bubble, also called bounce, would spread. And when it meant to spread is that there might just be a small region in the universe that would be another universe by itself, something with different rules in terms of everything, like gravity might be different in that bubble. And this bubble also expands at the speed of light, so basically you wouldn't even see it until it's actually right in front of you. Story 22. It is statistically likely that we are not the only ones in the universe. It's likely that life is too sparse to contact each other. Any contact that may have happened in the universe has probably died along with the civilizations. We could be so small on scale that we are living on a particle going through a chemical reaction, the Big Bang. Any heat left in the universe would eventually die out as our particle universe eventually and slowly never gets reacted with again. Story 23. The universe gets much bigger than it gets smaller from things that are around our size. If you cut a meter stick into 1,000,000 pieces, and then cut one of those pieces into another 1,000,000 pieces, and then cut one of those teeny tiny pieces into another 1,000,000 pieces, the piece you would have left would be around the size of a quark, which makes up stuff and seems to be the smallest thing we can divide matter into. If you do the same thing the other way, imagine a line of 1,000,000-meter sticks, and then for each stick, imagine adding another 1,000,000 sticks, and then another 1,000,000 for each of those sticks. The size of the observable universe would still be another 100,000,000 times bigger. The universe ain't just big, but it's spooky big. Story 24. Think of the fact that our galaxy alone contains over 300 billion stars, and our galaxy is just as average as one could get. Just imagine that if you flew by all those stars, it would just look like a blizzard of bright snowflakes. You wouldn't even be able to point out individually, and yet each one of those bright dots is a furnace raging with incomprehensible energy, with most of those dots having their own worlds no less complicated and different than ours orbiting them. As you're reading this, there are cyclones raging in countless gas giants, volcanoes erupting, asteroid strikes on the scale that killed the dinosaurs, maybe even alien life prospering, no less unique than ours right now. You may not notice it, but it's all happening as we speak, and although it may be obvious, it's still just so crazy to me. Story 25. So most of us are familiar with atoms and subatomic particles, right? Atoms are very empty. If a marble represented the nucleus of an atom, the electrons would be about 150 feet away, and smaller than that marble. Everything in between, the electron cloud, does not contain matter. It's just a field of magnetism. So everything you're touching feels fairly dense, right? You'd think it's because atoms are packed together incredibly tight to create solids. And I guess on our relative scale that's kind of true, but on the atomic level, even your very solid-seeming thumb is 99.9+% devoid of matter and is empty space, just held together by magnetism and repulsion. Story 26. There are two statements that are both 100% true at the same time, and the two are completely at odds with one another. 1. You could disappear from the earth tomorrow, and it would cause a ripple effect in the world in various ways. Things like people you would have met, talked to, or in some way altered their course. This could be as deep as affecting every person on the planet to some amount, or just a portion of it. But if it happens, there would be a huge change in the world. 2. If you disappear from the earth tomorrow, it wouldn't change anything at all in the universe. The days would continue and time would go on. Either way, you matter. Story 27. Gamma-ray bursts are basically galactic death rays that just randomly fire off from time to time. There is a non-zero chance that the Earth could be sterilized by one for no reason greater than simply bad luck. In fact, we may be dead already in that a gamma-ray burst could have occurred long ago, its path already determined, its course set to one day include our little mud ball, but it just hasn't gotten here. Yet story 28, that it goes infinitely in every direction. How is there no end? If you flew out of the observable universe and just kept going, you'd never see another thing, not only because there would be absolutely zero light, but because there is nothing else, except small rocks and dust ejected from our universe. But like, where the hell does our vacuum exist? It just is, and it is infinite, unless we find out it isn't, and maybe that's scarier. Story 29. There's this quantum event where one point of the universe becomes no point in the universe, aka nothing, and this point grows at the rate of the speed of light. So let's say this happens. We wouldn't see it coming. 1 second we're here, and the next we're not. Kinda the true ending of the universe. We're all done at the same time. Anyways, I heard this on a podcast, haha, so not much validity.